Hi, I'm Mike Houlihan.
And I'm Mark Thomas, and we are the co-founders of Evo3 Sports. So tonight is part two of our conversation on winning numbers and scouting. So this half is really more so in depth into the scouting process, in match and towards the end of matches and after matches, how Mike and I kind of reflect on information that we're getting, the information that we're providing, and even talking about some information that we're talking about with our programs the day after matches as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really reflects that full cycle that we talk about, that making sure that we are evaluating ourselves, educating ourselves, and elevating ourselves after the fact. So we hope you notice that throughout these two parts, and we hope you enjoyed part two. But now, all right, what are some things like, what are philosophies now you have? You have all this information. How do you then take that information, throw it through the funnel, and funnel out a game plan that might be for you as a coach, first level, and then let's say after that, then how do we narrow it down for the second level? What kind of things do you kind of look for?
I think from a philosophical perspective, right away, I would say that I always have significantly more information with my staff and I than I do with my team. I do not have the same scout that I provide for our athletes.
Yeah.
I am a big believer, and we need to focus on our side of the court. And I never want to give so much information that it's too much information, because it's going to be a lot. No matter what, they're trying to think about what they need to do with their own game and be the best players that they can be. And so sometimes if you provide too much information for athletes, I think that it becomes more overwhelming, and now they're completely confused, and now they're in a state of hesitation and trying to remember things rather than just go out and play their game. And so that level of information, what that is, it changes year to year for me. I actually keep my team very involved in the scouting report process. I want to know what they feel they need in order to feel the most prepared. Yes, I have certain key components that I want to get across, but the athletes are going to know best, all right, here's the key information that I need in order for me to feel the most prepared that I can be. And so that usually every year is my staple, my nucleus of info. And then from that point, things kind of branch off from there. They're always going to get our opponents, offensive, defensive strategies, their go-to attackers and stuff like that. They're always going to get hitting charts. But the way that information is shown and the way that it's given to them changes year to year. Sometimes it's more visual than it is, in pen and paper, right? Or typed up. Sometimes, they want that extra time. They just want a in-depth scout that, maybe limited film, not so much, because they just know that they can really break down this information statistically, and that's what they need. It really depends on the team.
I agree.
But I'm definitely a big believer in not overloading athletes with too much information. For myself, though, I do love to have rotations. I love to have what they run as a second and third option in each rotation. I want to know what they're running in and out of the system. I typically will have maybe a box score on me at times, so that way I can know, like, consistently, who are these people that they're going to go to. And then heat maps are definitely big for me too. And I know at the collegiate level, that's something that we get probably a little spoiled with. But heat maps are great for me as a source, not only to see maybe like the past 3 matches, but even like cumulatively where they like to attack to as well.
Yeah.
So a whole lot of information. That's why I started using an iPad now, more than just using the clipboard. But how about you?
Yeah, and I think it's very similar in aspects. I think for us, like you kind of said, it depends on the team, and everybody's a little different. So if we have a younger team, obviously it's going to be a lot more scarce of information very situational type of base stuff. Where if we have an older team, obviously you could probably throw more at them and they'd be comfortable with it. It's almost a build up process. For us though, like I kind of think of it as a coach, I'm building up a scouting report that is going to be for setters, pins, right sides, liberos, middles, and there's like a separate scouting report on what they have to look for, and then as a team, what are we looking for, and what are our main emphasis? So for us, like we'll have almost little different scouts per position, right?
Okay.
Things that people need to look at positionally. Setters, what do they have to look at? Like setters need to know what type of plays run better and why they run better based on blocking schemes, things of that nature.
Yep.
Where middles and hitters actually don't need to know that because you just receive your play from your setter and you run it. From there, though, you do want to know what type of shots. So, like hitters, I mean, setters don't need to know what type of shots hitters need to hit, but setters or hitters do need to know what type of shots based off of a set. On a 32, we're looking for deep corner type of stuff or whatever it might be. So we kind of break it down that way, and then that way each position gets a little bit more information. With I think setters getting most information for us, liberos getting the second most information, and then everything else from there is positionally or rotationally. If a team really doesn't actually move their lineup that often, we might be able to match people up how we want to and know that they're going to have 90% chance that they're going to have these rotations or one of very close. But for us, it's really about, again, I think the main purpose, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like it's pretty much everyone. It's how do I counter their strengths and enhance my strengths?
Yeah.
That's what it really comes down to in the long run. It's at the most simplest kind of explanation of what scouting is. It's counter their strengths, enhance yours, while minimizing your weaknesses and maximizing theirs. That's
Exactly.
really what it comes down to. How do I hide my weaknesses, enhance my strengths? How do I counter their strengths? Because they're strengths for a reason. You're not going to stop things altogether. And then how do I maximize their worst points? All right. So obviously, I don't know, I kind of see that there's a lot of obviously different ways you can attack teams, but a lot of kind of concepts that you really kind of look at is maybe what are their big offensive points? All right. What do you match up well against? What are their worst defensive points and best defensive points? How do you match up? What are jam points? Like, for instance, like little things that as a coach you just love, like that. Like I love when people run a slide at me especially with a front court hitter, or excuse me, setter, because I'll just jam them up and I'll just shoot to the two spot every single time. Just
Yeah.
hey, all right, run as many slides as you want, but I'm going to limit that person. So unless they're going to start jacking balls up there and they're going to have to run something else or the ball's going out, things like that. But
Yeah.
I think too, like, and I wonder if you talk about this as well, but do you ever like look at a scout and you're just like, wow, like let's talk hitters. Well, there's no beating that, right? They are going to have their way with this, whether it's like numbers 5 is going to have their way with us. So we're going to focus on everything else and ignore number 5, right? If she has 10 to 4, like we talked about earlier, what are winning numbers? 11. If she's hitting 11 to 14 kills per set with 4 errors or less, yes, they're probably going to beat us, but no one puts up those numbers. Like, what are some other things that you kind of look at in that aspect? What are some thoughts that kind of go through your head on generalized scouting?
So, the way that I look at scouting, yes, I do have this belief. And of course, there's going to be those athletes out there that they're going to get their points. Like that's just it. They're going to get their points. However, what are certain ways that we might be able to contain?
Mm-hmm.
We might be having those types of conversations when it comes to our scouting reports. So I don't like to put it necessarily to a point where I say, hey, we're going to do our best against her, but let's just try to contain and that's it. For me, it's more so there might be something about her game that might make it that much more challenging for her. if she really struggles with, off blocker defense, digging, and then actually executing out of that, however, I can make her as exhausted maybe as humanly possible sometimes. Maybe that ends up being part of our scout and part of our game plan, right?
30 passes, 30 swings.
Exactly. Like I know you have that exact same mentality. And so, we won't put it off to the side necessarily, but I almost enjoy the challenge of, okay, but how are we going to make this person really earn it? And so here's how we can do that. Otherwise, when it comes to trying to counter,
hold on, before you go on though, I want everyone to remember that scenario, the 30 kills, 30 passes, 30 attempts later on, because I'm going to have a pet peeve of mine that goes out, but go ahead.
Perfect. But going into, how to counter some other components or how to use something else to your advantage, I think you have to look at what your strengths are year to year and find a way to utilize that, right? If defense is your strength, and yes, this person might be crushing it, maybe your goal is to have a higher dig percentage against everyone else, right? Maybe it's you have a goal of attacking a specific player because we know, all right, well, at least they're going to get out of system, so it makes it that much more challenging for them to do this. If you offensively have this one specific, tool, or you can attack this specific location on the court that systematically is going to push them out, that might be how you're countering that, right? And so, yes, I definitely think that there's always a way, right, to either make it more challenging for that either great player or what they do best, but there's also a way of putting them in scenarios where it might not be a possibility for them to execute what they want to execute, depending on what your strengths are. So.
Yeah, and I think I agree. And I think now, though, all right, so we developed our scout. We know what we want to do. We know our focus points, whether it's team-wise only or positionally or whatever it is. Now, I know you talked about, like, how do you deliver now scouts, right? How do you deliver scouting reports to a team? That's your next step, right? So for us, obviously, again, so if you're a high school coach or obviously a college coach or something along those lines where you're not playing match after match after match, obviously at those situations, it's to get information in between the people playing books, doing that enough. But if you're even little things like if you're playing in a Nerva, the teams that are going to be a kind of opposite of you, you can maybe do some scouting and stuff prior to, because these teams. But for us, when we deliver, we always deliver we have two main scouting kind of meetings. We'll do things a little throughout the week with players and things like that, but the day before, we focus 100% on the other team. And that's just all our information that we put out there is going to be against the other or about the other team. We're going to do this. You're going to see this. You're going to see that. You're going to see these situations. If we use film, depending on team, again, if they do well with film, we're going to show them scenarios of that other team. The next day, the day of the match, we don't bring that up anymore. It's all about us. And this is what you kind of alluded to earlier too, depending on your team. But that day of the match, at some level, we want our players to do them, right? We want them to do what they do best. And if it fits well into the scheme and they're able to kind of take the scheme that we want to kind of attack and they do well, great. But first comes first is they need to do them. They have to play their game in order to feel confident, to be successful, and to be able to get the most out of them. Do you do anything like that kind of differentiates and helps in those type of situations?
Yeah, I think the way that I look at it is a little different. It's essentially what I strive for with maybe the athletes that aren't in our starting lineup, and this is something that I emphasize in fulfilling roles, is, we need you to execute our opponent's tendencies. And here's what they look like, and you're fulfilling your role in our program by helping us prepare best for our upcoming opponent. You know, you're helping, you know, our starters get better. And that's kind of how I talk about it, because it is, you know, when I look at it that way, as our second team and beyond needs to play just like our opponents, it looks different. It feels different. It provides more of like I take pride in this is what I'm doing to make our team better. And so I do provide information, if I can, days in advance. If it's the beginning of a week, for example, and maybe we have a weekend game that we're looking at, Monday and Tuesday, we might chip a couple pieces of information of some things that we need to keep in mind, right? And then I will probably have some drills that either, you know, counter that or know how to work against that. So that way we are prepping slowly throughout the course of the week. So that way, if we get to, you know, say Thursday, for example, just like you say, maybe that's your day of, you know, the day before match, you're focused completely on your opponent. Our practice team is going through the rotations and running what they run. I have players being certain attackers, so they have to attack that same way. So that way it is preparing our starters to be able to do that. And I also, you know, again, the way that I have my program though is so that way, even if there is like a backup player that I know has very good chances of being, you know, someone off the bench that we might utilize, they're going on that starting side as well. So that way they can prepare for it too. In regards to video, I definitely like giving video if I can, the day before and the day of as well.
Okay.
Even before leaving for matches, if we're going on the road or something like that. If I can find a way of just getting them some rotation, some attacking tendencies at least, and then maybe seeing the servers. I do like them having that visual, seeing them before we actually play again. A lot of coaches I do see on scouting reports, they might have photos of athletes. So they have a visual, but just in a different way. They're visualizing the player and then they're seeing attacking charts. We're just doing visuals of, all right, we're watching live film and this is what it looks like, right? So in regards to how we counter it, we focus on us by our starters executing our game plan that we're going to try to utilize against our practice team, who's reenacting what our opponent will most likely do. Just because our scouting is that in depth, we do try to utilize that as much as we possibly can. If it's a quick turnaround, you know, maybe we played on Saturday, we have Sunday off, and we have a Tuesday game, for example. Like maybe you have a conference match on a Tuesday. We're probably not preparing as much on court with that information. We're probably giving them, all right, here's, you know, their strengths. Here's some drills that we're going to work on so that way we can prepare for those strengths on their side. Here's some drills that we can prepare so that way we're maximizing our strength and what our game plan is going to be. And then we get into gameplay just to try to prepare as best as we can. So it really depends on the time.
So this is something that I don't think we've ever really talked about, but now you talked about that kind of stuff, right? And I'm assuming, obviously, everything we have talked about to this point has been for very competitive matches, right? And then obviously, if you feel a team is much better than you, you're obviously going to continue kind of going down. Now, I guess the ultimate thing is, what do you do if you are coming up against an opponent that typically isn't as strong, right? And film might actually be almost a negative to show your team. Or is it a positive to kind of show them what they're really like? But you ever have those situations where maybe a team isn't taken as seriously because of years past, or taken as seriously because you've played them before, and how do you counteract those type of things? I guess, I mean, it's at some level part of a scout, but it's trying to protect your team from maybe misconceptions or potentially protect them from their own self. Do you do anything in those situations differently?
So the way that I approach scouting as a coach and what I can control, it doesn't matter 100%. How terrible a team is. It doesn't matter how amazing a team is. I prepare for them the exact same way.
100%.
because I am of this mindset that I, as a coach, never want to put my team in a scenario that I feel that they're not prepared because of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel that it's my role to make sure that I'm giving 100%. And it doesn't matter who that opponent is. I'm going to give you, you know, the same structure and same information as best as I possibly can. And that doesn't depend on the talent level at all.
100%.
But in regards to the visual, sometimes making maybe our team feel at ease, unfortunately, yes, there have been times where I have had atrocious game film of opponents, and I don't want to show it to our team because I don't want them to take it lightly. However, what I am doing is it's also in the way that you deliver this information to them. When it comes to bad teams can get wins because you're not ready to expect the unexpected, right? When it comes to some lower talent level programs, they can get a win on any given night if you're not taking care of business on your side. And so I have this mindset of, even if a team's bad, I will pitch them to our team as if they are always solid. And you need to be as best prepared as possible. And yes, every year a team might have a certain reputation, but I have seen teams from the bottom of a conference be in the top of a conference in the turnaround of 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with that in mind, I've just been able to kind of get information across and make sure that we are going to, you know, approach this the same way that we always do. One, because of business, we're taking care of business, but also two, a way that I approach it is you want to get your teammates on the court, you know, because they've earned this opportunity as well. You owe it to them as starters. If they're that bad, the team that we're
Put
playing
them away.
You owe it to your teammates to put them away as quickly as possible, to give your teammates, those who trained you to be this well prepared against this team, you owe them the opportunity to play against them. And to me, nothing's more rewarding. And so when you pitch it to your team like that and you have that built into your culture, I think they do push for that. Does it happen all the time? Absolutely not. You know, I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, it happens, you know, perfectly every time the bench gets in and it's great. Trust me, there's plenty of times where that thought process can even backfire. And then all of a sudden teammates feel bad because they weren't able to get their teammates in too. So you gotta be balanced about that and how you're approaching that, but also just giving different goals and game plans is another way that I approached it. You know, sometimes our game plan might be, you know, we need to be digging at 65%. And I might get a weird look and be like, well, why is that the game plan? Well, it's the game plan because that's how quickly we need to execute this. You know, this is a team that isn't so successful. If we're not taking them lightly, our dig percentages should be this much higher. Our pass ratings across the board, I might push to a 2-1, you know, pins included. So giving them different goals, match to match, also helps kind of counter that level of comfortability that some athletes can get if they see that a team is not great. And I'm sure that you even witnessed that with your teams when they're scouting live too. If you have the opportunity to maybe watch your upcoming opponent, if they're absolutely terrible, sometimes you're looking at that as a coach and you're like, oh my gosh, all right, well, how do I get them to hone in? And for me, it's just always been about, well, these are the reasons why we take care of business, and here's your challenges in order to, you know, prove that you're doing it. How about you?
I think you're 100% right in terms of it's cultural. I think it's something, and I think they mirror you and they'll mirror your energy. I'm a big believer that I don't think coaches should supply energy, but I think obviously coaches set tones in terms of what's business and what's not anymore. And I think that's the big part is if you treat them differently, your team's going to treat them differently. And that's probably a negative. But I think on the other side of it too, I mean, when you do look at film and you see players' faces on the opposite side of it, that you might be that poor team, right? What are we going to do to stop this? Like, that girl is hitting 3 feet over these blockers, like obviously not 3 feet, but you know what I mean? Like those type
100%.
of scenarios. And I think too, again, it's going to match your tone. It's going to
Yeah.
match the way that you approach it. If you're approaching it as, I mean, you see this maybe when you hit playoffs and you're a low seed as, oh man, we're here, we made it. Let's go out there and have fun. When it's like, no, I mean, I get that. I think we should have fun in every game that we play, but we approach it the same way. And when we try to find those nicks and those kind of nicks in the games that we can take advantage of, and I think it's really about that
Absolutely.
tone.
Yeah.
So I guess going in the next part, I think, like I talked about, day of the match, we really focus on us only. And a lot of times I feel like I see pregame now, right? A lot of coaches are pointing things out or saying, look at the girl over there. That's this, look at the thing. And I don't really do any of that stuff. I trust our scout. I trust that our players know what they're doing. I trust the fact that we provided them the information they needed. And for me, pregame as well, I mean, I try to let, I mean, obviously we have structure in our pregame, but I try to let them kind of just do their own thing. And for us as a program, we really only intervene with what that is. If we notice that match after match, whatever they're doing is not working in terms of mentally getting there or mentally. Do you have anything like that? Do you leave the team alone? Do you have pregame type of rituals? Do you limit things that they can do prior to matches, whether it's on the bus or not on the bus or at the convention centers or not? Is there anything that you kind of think about that pregame part?
Um, I guess some pregame, that hour before and stuff like that. Ritual's big to me, and just going through the same repetition, every single match. It just creates confidence in each athlete when they can go through their own routine and what is it they're doing. I try not to mess with our athletes, unless they need like a quick pep talk, prior to game time or something like that. Some athletes just like to have that fired up type of conversation to get them ready to go. But I mean, outside of that, I tend not to talk to them about anything. Just like you, I'm confident enough in our game plan and our scouting reports, and their knowledge of it as well, because there is a certain tone that we're setting with that. Yes, we're creating game plans for you, but we also expect you to know them to a certain degree as well.
Oh yeah.
They're not just for random information. And so, when you have that type of expectation in your program, I'm not going to be sitting there going, see, like that's what I'm talking about right there. They're going to have that same conversation with each other on the sideline as we get ready to go.
Yeah.
So, in that aspect, yeah, I really am not too involved in warm-ups as a head coach, but as an assistant coach, I'm incredibly involved in just making sure that things run as smoothly as possible. But pregame for us is that similar mentality of you where you say, all right, we're just focused on us. We're just focused on us. We're focused on getting our reps in. We're focused on having a great, solid warm up. We're going to do the same thing that we always do, so that way it looks good, we feel good, we're ready to go. It doesn't really have anything to do with even the defensive systems that we're running at times. Sometimes we'll run a completely different defensive system in our game plan than the defensive system that they might run in their 6 versus 6 and in their last 5 minutes, for example.
I agree.
It's just a matter of, we know what we're doing. We're ready to go. But yeah, try not to get in the mind of the athlete right before game time, because they're trying to channel something, right? They're getting in their mode where they're ready to go. And if me as a coach, like all of a sudden I step in, I give them a couple of different words. Now they're focused on something completely different. I don't want to get them out of their element. So I look at it from the psychological aspect of the game too.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And so now let's go into, we're in the match, right? We are trying to get our team to perform. Now, going back to our 30 and 30, right? So this scout, we are now focusing on overloading a player. They take 30 swings a game. So you know what? let's let them take 30 swings a game, right? Let's let them. But you know what else they're going to do? They're going to get 30 digs. They're going to have to get 30 balls served at them. And we're going to overwhelm this person to play every aspect of the game possible, right? So going back to that, that's something that I utilize actually quite a bit as a coach at some level. Is let's make their best player truly beat us with every touch. One of my biggest pet peeves is when you develop scouting reports, and if you're taking your scouting report and you think they should win you every single point, and then what you do is you see coaches who abandon scouting reports one set into the match because it didn't work. That is like one of my biggest pet peeves is when like, even as, or if I have an assistant, or even like when I was an assistant or I have an assistant and they're like, all right, we got to change things up. And it's like, sometimes yes, sometimes yeah, it's pretty obvious. But there's a lot of times though that I feel that people don't stick to their scouting reports if it's not perfect yet. And for me, when I build scouting reports, it's like what I've talked about earlier in sessions, like with setters, we look to play chess rather than checkers. That's a huge part.
Right.
We want to know, I'm going to make this look like it's checkers, very simplistic, but there's a longer gameplay at this. And I feel like when people abandon scouts too quickly and they don't let the game develop into these scenarios, it's almost like I brought up earlier. I want to watch a full match and see how things develop, right? If I'm watching rotation 1 only and then 2 only and 3, and you don't get those other feels of it, you might think that this should work every single time. And that's not how the game works. And if you're building scouts that are that predictable that you're kind of taking advantage of one aspect, they're going to be picked up on pretty quick. And I guess to me is like going through the entire process that we've talked about to this point, to see a program and like just trash it midway because the first set didn't go their way, that bothers me. Like, do you ever like have anything like that like, is there anything that you kind of think about in those scenarios? Like,
yeah, so I definitely see those who abandon scouting reports quickly. But what I have also started to realize about that though are those who abandon scouting reports quickly are typically the ones that either they don't scout an entire match, or they might not know the scout very well either though. So it's one of those. Yes, as coaches, all of us are scouting our opponents, but we all scout differently, and some don't scout for the long, longevity of the entire match, right? Some of them just feel that, oh, coaches will do the same thing sets 1, through 3. I'll just stay for the first 3 sets, and then, oh, whatever happens in set 4 or 5 is all dependent upon the game. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm actually looking for sets 4 and 5. What are they doing? Those are the sets I'm focused on the most at times. The start, set 1, yeah, absolutely. I think all of us are looking for like what teams want to do out of the gate. But then I'm watching the end of games because I want to know what's going on depending upon certain variables as well. That way I know which scheme and which strategy I want to utilize depending upon their strengths and weaknesses in certain parts of the game. If I know that this team at the end of matches just tails off in the second half of a set, well, that's when we're putting the pedal to the metal. I need to get a faster tempo offense going on in the second half of those sets. I gotta, there's different things that you can use to your advantage when you look at matches as a whole. But that's just some correlations that I've seen, or those that aren't so confident in their scouting that they're like, you know what, this isn't working. We have to change it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was I didn't see what I was seeing, and then they'll flip.
Yeah, I think too the other part too that I always think about as a coach is those scenarios, right? You go set 1 or something and you go up 15 points or you go down 15 points. I even
Mhm.
look at scenarios to stop utilizing my scout, right? If I am down so far and it's like we're at that 20 to, I don't know, 5 mark or something like really horrific like that, it's like, no, let's start clean, right? Let's not show them too much information yet. We're holding a deck of cards and you start set two at 0-0. I'm not going to show you my cards because I lost set one. Or vice
Right.
versa. If I'm up big, I'm not going to execute. So I'm going to make checkers look like checkers. I'm not going to execute the chess move essentially. I'm going to wait
Yeah.
until we actually need it. And that goes into play because again, you have to watch how games develop. You have to see, and like those are some of the things. For instance, like too, um, in those situations too, um, like you're going at somebody, right? And you go by, and as a coach, like you talked about, you have to trust. There's two things in this world that you got to trust. And you got to trust yourself, right? Right. If you're properly trust yourself, then you're doing things right. And you got to trust
Yeah.
statistics. Those two things, statistics more than anything. I'm a very statistical guy. Just because the libero that you wanted to serve in certain situations rallies off 4 threes in the first set of the match in passing, right? Statistics don't lie. They have to
Right.
even out at some point. And I have that, like, and again, if she came and she beat us, yeah, I mean, if she's doing the same thing by set, we're halfway through set two and they're doing the same thing, or we're in set three, we don't have a win and we're doing the same thing. Yes, you have to adjust. I'm not saying that, but abandoning too early, you have to let statistics ride out. I mean,
Right.
otherwise, then don't look at a box score. Don't look at hitting
Yeah.
percentages.
If
That's
you're
what you're
going to
doing.
i- if you're going to abandon things that quickly, you're wasting a lot of time on your scouts, right? You, you know, it's almost like you're just playing the game of reaction, rather than anticipation, and then playing, you know, the game from there.
Yeah, and then
Um,
not to mention you're adding stress to players, and that's what we don't want to do as coaches. So now we talk about this though, like, all right, so now what do we do now? We realize part of our scout, all of our scout is just not working at the moment. The team is playing lights out. Now, as a coach, you want to make these adjustments to what you see, right? And I think again, I think you gotta. I really want to stress caution in these moments. Big, big, big caution signs, because again, there's a bunch of different factors to it, and again, one of them's pregame. You have to know what your team is good at and what they're not good at. Are they good at change? Are they not good at change? Can
yeah.
they can they adjust well in these situations, or are you just going to put your team in a worse situation and you're going to drive confidence down, right? How many changes can you make without telling them, right?
Hmm.
How many times can you serve differently or rotate a little bit to adjust for something without letting them know that you're adjusting for it, right? How many of these type of mid-match kind of things do you think of? And like, is your team able to manipulate rotations mid-match, right? Did you teach them enough where they, or do they know enough that you can say, I mean, how many times do you see at the end of a match? Have you ever, like, I'm sure you've seen it, every coach seen it, when you're sitting up in the stands and a team is about to lose and someone got shanked, point 21, shank, point 22 for the other team, right? And you're like, push her up, push her back, pull it back, right? And then out of nowhere, it's what? Shank, 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 over. Because your team, if your team's not comfortable in those situations, then you're probably doing worse, especially if it's not the end of a match, it's the end of a set or something like that.
For sure.
Do you have any advice in those like mid-match type of adjustments and how to approach them, or maybe what do you got to consider beforehand versus kind of after the fact? Any kind of advice you have?
In regards to making changes mid-match, I think that it's tough to say, but maybe has to be said. That there are changes that you might want to make as a coach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your team can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As coaches, yes, we might know how to counter this, but if your team cannot do that,
That's the point.
you're setting them up for failure by telling them this is what we're going to do in our game plan now. I have seen programs in the past try to change their defensive system, and athletes just look lost. Um,
Lost.
they know the defensive system, but in the heat of the moment, changing up in the middle of a match, they're freezing, right? Then you
Hmm.
have coaches being super upset, getting after their kids, and it's okay. Yeah, should they know it? Yes. However, you have to know how your team reacts to things, just like you're saying. And I think that the more knowledge that you have about how your team can react in certain situations, the better your decision making is going to be when you do make a choice on
Hmm.
that, whether you want to change it or not. But also, I think the common theme that we have been talking about is how well we prepare our athletes to increase their volleyball IQ and versatility, so that way when they do get into these instances,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. So the more that you're preparing them in practice to throw them off, and again, I always preach it as we are expanding your volleyball IQ. We're helping you to be the smartest volleyball player that you can be and beyond. We can outwit our opponents at times if we can't, beat them with pure athleticism or talent, right? And so if we can be the smartest ones in the gym, that can produce wins as well. And so
Yeah.
I've always had this mentality of I need to prepare our athletes for as many unique situations as we possibly can, but also preparing them to be able to make adjustments
Hmm.
as quickly as possible. I'm not going to say every team accomplishes it, but we definitely strive to make adjustments as quickly as we possibly can imagine.
And I think too, and now I also want to kind of emphasize the fact that it's a two-way street. If you as a coach aren't confident, then you need to, again, caution, do not move kind of thing. As a coach, if you're
Right.
not, have you ever also seen like a coach make those rotational adjustments and then get called out of kind of out of rotation, right? That is
Yeah.
now is a killer aspect. Your team looks at you like you got to be kidding me at the moment. And for me, it's like you have to know what you're great as a coach as well as your players.
For
It's
sure.
it's absolutely a huge point in that if you're not great at readjusting defenses, right? And now you're just out there just hooting and hollering or you're trying to push people up and now you're pushing them out of rotation or that falls on you as a coach. And I think that's actually more detrimental because now your players are losing confidence in you. You just lost confidence in you. That's hard to come back from. And I think it is. It's about that honesty factor of knowing my team can do this 100%. Or I'm 50-50 on it below, don't touch it. It's either
Right.
you know they can do it or you know you can do it, or if you can't, don't touch it. I mean, I had a really good scenario. So like, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. I am by far the most confident as a coach when it comes to rotations and
Yeah.
manipulating them and understanding the rules well enough to properly explain them to my players and explain why certain scenarios can happen and not. And one of our big scenarios that we've had in the past is um, like we've changed liberos who they go in for in situations. So we used to have a player who like go in and serving sub for a middle, and now and I tell her every time like, hey, we're at the end of the match, one serve, and if she misses, you go back in normal. If she makes it, that player's staying. You're going in for our outside as a libero, and then we're keeping that to run through because it's the last 3 to 4 points a game, and I want my best players on the court, regardless.
Right.
In
Yeah.
the final 4 5 points match, I want my best players on the court, and I want my libero on the court. I hate watching where someone is serving and like if they're down a few points and then they're serving, and your libero just keeps staying out. Like that makes no sense to me. Your libero is your best player. Get him out there, right?
For sure.
Situationally. But now I was able to teach my kids, and we practiced it a lot, where it's you're all right, come out, you're going in for the outside. Look at who your opposites are. And then my my serving spec. All right, pop in a quick DS if we need to, or keep my serving spec, whatever. So know your opposite. You're opposite of the middle. You're opposite of an outside. Know this situation. You are not going traditional in your rotations. As a setter, you have to know that these two people in rotation 2, or excuse me, not rotation 3, this outside. Now the libero can't go up past that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those are the things that sometimes you see coaches doing, and you're like, oh no. Or sometimes I find myself trying to do it, and it's like, oh, I really screwed that up. We needed to practice this before I implemented this type of thing. And that's why it's know your players, but more importantly, know you and know yourself. That's big.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. I think that it's also a common theme though too, that you'll see coaches get so upset and flustered, but at the same time, you got to look at yourself first and say, one, are you confident in these changes that you're asking them to make? Because if you're not confident, how can they be, right?
Yeah.
But also two, that you, as a coach, it can't be I am telling you how to do these things, but I'm setting you up for failure at the same time as well. You certainly have to know your stuff, and rely on other coaches though to help you through that too. If you have questions, ask them. That's the purpose of what it is that we're doing here with Evo 3 and creating a collaborative platform. And so it is a matter of, we want to grow as coaches too. And so by reflecting, it can go a long way in how you're going to improve yourself, which then makes your program better, right? So that's what it's all about.
All right, so let's reflect, right? Now we're at the end of the match. Match is over. Team's gone, right? We have our winning numbers. We have a balance sheet concept. We have a box score that we just received, and we have a scouting report. 4 major aspects. What do you do with them after? Do you just kind of discard them, move on to the next opponent? What do you kind of do afterwards?
The reflection of matches, we look at things from a statistical standpoint first and foremost to see, what were our strengths, what our weaknesses. Where do we counter our weaknesses though as well? That's a big point. Because again, just like I was saying earlier in our conversation, we might have struggled really tough in one aspect, but if we did phenomenal in these other aspects, I want to talk about how this and playing at this level helped us counter this. And that's the reason why we train a certain way. But in regards to maybe changes that I would make for the future scout, if it's an opponent that we're going to see again, I'll make some quick notes on a scouting report so that way I know which ones I want to change just from initial experience. Doesn't essentially mean that I'm going to put those things in the scout next, because I still want to see what their most recent few matches were like, and see what they're doing at that point. But it is good for me to see, hey, where do we get hurt? Where did we hurt them? And be able to utilize that information in the future scouting reports, hopefully, especially the part where we did great, because that is something that we could hopefully utilize in our next scouting report and our next game plan. But there is a lot of reflection that happens. The team is probably going to get more information about things from a statistical standpoint. But for us as coaches, when we are reflecting on what's happening in the match, we will talk about the scout and we'll talk about whether it's accurate or not. I think that at least for me, it's kind of funny when you walk out of a match and you go, man, this is if you lost, for example. If you lose,
I know what you're saying.
That scouting report was spot on.
And you just couldn't get it.
But that's the thing, you do want to see as a person who's creating these scouting reports, and I take great pride in doing that, because that's what
I think that's your biggest
my whole
confidence.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'm probably the most confident in. I put so much work into that it's at the end of the day, I just have to be able to rely on that. And again, I think that, as you said before, confidence means everything. And so when I'm putting that much work into it, I know for a fact, like, man, all right, I did it. I got that information to them, but the execution wasn't there, and we need to figure out why. So, yeah.
And I'm with you. So first things first is, like I talked about, I balance sheet the box score. I balance sheet the statistics based on that match, right? And I'll take a look and I'll say, all right, what did we hit? What didn't we hit? Why didn't we hit it? What did we overcompensate with? Or what did we not compensate with? And then what I'll do is I'll take that kind of idea and that philosophy, and then I'll look at our scout and I'll compare now to which part of our scouts, either did my scout take care of this where we overcompensated for something? Was it supposed to and it didn't? Maybe the scout wasn't as proper as it should have been in that sense. And it all comes down to those scenarios. It's
Right.
what did the scout actually do? Did it work? Did it create the situations we wanted it to create? Statistically, did it provide the results that we were looking for it to be? And then you also have that, like you said, I mean, you might lose a match knowing your scout was spot on, right?
Yeah.
But so-and-so player on the other team they were up there. They did.
Yeah.
And they haven't been like that all year. So you might utilize same scout versus another team and see if she can handle the same type of pressure. Maybe alter it at some level versus that
Yeah.
team again later on. But to me, it goes down to, were we right? Like you said, were we right in the sense that win or loss doesn't matter at that point. Was the vision correct? Did they overcompensate in different areas to make it work for them? Did we overcompensate enough? Or did we utilize this scout to drive down statistical points for them and we were able to compensate that? And kind of pinpointing those parts. That's
Yeah.
what's big to me. It's those driving points that we affected the box score versus the box score was just what it was, or they affected the box score or by over kind of adjusting towards what we were doing. And then it's like, all right, now do we have to actually do both these things to kind of draw them down next time or was there kind of countering it, maybe not as on purpose, I guess, in those scenarios.
Definitely. You're reflecting on each aspect of the scout and what hit and what missed, right? And so I think that when you look at your scouts that way, you're benefiting overall because you can make them that much more powerful and that much more relatable with your program in the future. So definitely.
Yeah. And then last point for this that I want to make, end of game locker room talks. For us, those talks are purely emotional, in a sense, where we don't talk about aspects of the match in terms of statistics or, hey, we passed like this, how many times have you walked away from a game thinking it was one reason we lost, but it was actually a completely different reason you lost? Like, you ever have those moments? Or
yeah,
like a team?
I think that for me, it doesn't happen too often where I'm missing it completely. However, I do like to kind of have a vague conversation, so to speak, depending upon the numbers, like I said before, and then I'll go more in depth after, like, reflecting and looking at the film.
Yeah, I just think, I'm the 100% with that. It's we can touch on some quick box score type of things, but I mean, if a girl hit, I don't know, like 150, right? I want to know why. I want to know what led to the 150. Was she set more balls out of system than not out of system? Was it really truly her fault, or was it the passing that kind of caused those type of issues? Was it their serving was just really good against that rotation? Like, so at some level, I think you're right, but I mostly want to talk about the idea of the match. What happened? Did we enact our scout based on what it felt like? Did our emotion drop? Did we not adjust well? Did we not play well? And then the next day, prior to the next practice, whatever it is, that's when we'll actually go through and be like, hey, look, these were our biggest fault points. So now let's utilize that information. This is where we're going to take it from here, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we kind of do it. We want to limit that reason why we won or reason why we lost until I can look at the film better to make sure that maybe it was my fault, right? A lot of coaches go in and they're like, we didn't execute the scout. Oh, maybe the scout was wrong, right?
Yeah.
It could be my fault. And that's why for us, I like to limit that type of talk in the locker room outside of what's the emotions we're feeling. Did we feel like we should have won? Did we not up our preparation as a coaching, like that type of stuff, versus this is the reason we lost. We need to fix this. When sometimes it's may not actually be that. And I think
Yeah.
for me, I just don't want to talk too soon.
No, that's fair, and I think that's the power of film, though, as well, and having the ability to do so. It's you can take the time. You know, you don't need to answer right away. I feel that at times coaches almost feel like they have to say the right thing at that moment. You know, sometimes it's better to not say too much. You know, give some positive words, and then talk more in depth the next day. I actually like to make that a team collaboration. And so I do ask open-ended questions to our team the next day and ask them what their thoughts are. I like asking after the match. I also like asking the next day, so that way all of us are looking at the film, not just myself. And I think that by everyone having the opportunity to kind of look and reflect and come back, you definitely get a lot more information out there that is certainly more relatable to the real issues, rather than what you think the issues are based on the heat of the moment, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think that's my biggest cautionary tale is if you do feedback at the end of the match, allow a secondary feedback opportunity where clear heads can kind of provide different insights than the heat of the moment. So if you do it at post game, make sure you try to look at opportunities to do it after the match as well. Next day, let players have a new say at it because they might have a different perspective. You might have one as well. So definitely try to get both those scenarios. But
all right,
yeah, good talk. Wow.
Awesome. No, this was great, man. We were able to break down winning numbers, but also scouting and really in depth from the time that we're getting film to the time that post match, and what that looks like. When it comes to scouting reports and different workshops and stuff like that I've been in the past, it's always been, well, here's what we do, and here's what we provide, and here's the reasons why, and this is why it works. I think that this was just a different look as to scouting as a whole, from the time that you're getting film to the time that the match is already done, and reflecting on it. So this was really cool.
Yeah, it was. I think so too. And this is our last one for this series for a while through Nerva. So just like this, like Mark talked about, if you can go through the 3 E's, right? You can evaluate, educate, elevate. This is that process. And if anyone wants any more information on any of this stuff, reach out to us. We're more than happy to keep talking shop with whoever wants to talk. Well, thank you. It's good talking with Mark again.
Definitely. That was a great conversation. Take care.
All right, later. All right, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Evo3Sports. Also, follow us on our website, www.evo3sports.com.